Okay, we're about ready to start. Lucinda's just finalizing some things, so everybody put on your game face.
Ken, your face is not showing up.
That's fine. You don't need to see my face.
Okay. Oh.
Wow, it's getting really windy here.
Yeah, the rain today was, whew.
Okay, we're good to go? Mm-hmm. Okay, Mayor, we are good to go. Go ahead and start the meeting.
Great. I'd like to go ahead and call this of the Fullerton City Council Successor Agency to order. Ms. City Clerk, could you please read the roll?
Mayor Fitzgerald?
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Flory?
Here.
Councilmember Silva?
Here.
Councilmember Whitaker?
Here.
And Councilmember Zara?
Here.
Great. Thanks so much. I want to welcome everybody to this second video meeting of the Fullerton City Council. And I'd love to hear from Pastor Jason Phillips, police chaplain, an invocation for this evening.
First off, it takes some time to thank you, City Council, and all our city staff who we know are working so incredibly hard right now, seeking to therefore serve our residents. I'm going to take the time, if I can, to put a plug in for lovefullerton.org. During the pandemic, many of us have been collaborating with churches and nonprofits, and know that Love Fullerton, the Serve Day isn't happening, but we're using the Love Fullerton.org to be a one-stop shop for all needs in our city. And we have 5 buttons there that will lead you to multiple ways in which you can learn and serve our city. First one's pray. You can learn how to be a part of a larger and what to pray for. You can donate. There are many of our nonprofits who are working incredibly hard and trying to meet the needs of our residents. And so you can find those nonprofits. You can click on those nonprofits and find out ways in which you can donate. You can click on the volunteer button, find out ways to volunteer. We've had blood drives. We've had people buying and taking groceries to the elderly who are in need and can't go out right now. You can find out ways to encourage our city staff, our police, our fire, and our medical workers who are working so incredibly hard at great risk for us. And then there's Block Champion, where you can learn how can you start to take care of and know the needs of your neighbors. So please go to lovefullerton.org, and I encourage you all to check it out. And if you have a need, please press the submit a project, and we can find out and put that up there as well. Please pray with me. Lord, I know you already know this, but we need you. We need your healing. We need your energy and grace to fill us, to do the work of loving our neighbors in your world right now. With Easter arriving, I'm reminded that you, God, the God I worship, is not far off, but present, and present in our suffering. I believe you are a compassionate God. So, Lord, help us be compassionate and mindful of those who are alone, hungry, fearful, alienated, sick, poor, worried, and vulnerable right now. May we follow your example and be compassionate as you are. Hear the cries of our needs and respond, Lord, and may we respond in continued prayer and action. Lord, we need your healing, and we do need a miracle. I want to close with this prayer from Psalm 10. Rise, Yahweh, God, raise your hand. Do not forget the afflicted. You have seen for yourself the trouble and grief and fear. You watch so as to take it in your hand. Yahweh, you listen to the laments of the poor. You give them courage. You grant them a hearing. Amen. Thank you.
Okay.
Amen to that. That was a powerful message from Pastor Phillips. I always love to hear a prayer from him, and he's right. As I've been saying, even now there are ways to be a blessing to others, and going to Fullerton.org and figuring out a way to give back even now. There are many ways, and it's great because it not only helps others, but it will make you feel better, like you're contributing as well. Councilman Zara, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight?
I'd be happy to. Everyone, we are united in our resolve, so follow me. I pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now I would ask if any council member has any ex parte communications. And for those of us from the public who are joining us for this meeting, that just simply means I'm asking any council member if they have had private communications with any representative of one of our city employee groups. Councilman Zara?
Nope.
Mayor Pro Tem Flory? Mr. Whitaker?
No.
Mr. Silva?
Nope.
Okay, thanks so much. And we don't have any report out from our closed session. Our closed session that usually happens at 5 o'clock was canceled. We're going to adjourn this meeting and go into closed session tonight. And then we will come back out publicly and report if there are any reportable items from closed session. So with that, and seeing that there are no presentations, I will go ahead and ask the city clerk, do we have public comments this evening that are based on things we have jurisdiction on, but that are not on our agenda? Or are there any comments on consent calendar items?
I have one comment on a consent calendar item. If you'd like, I can read that now.
Yes, please.
With this potential grant, this is from, let me scroll up, J. Tembo. With this potential grant, are other items addressed in addition to replanting new tees? For example, funding to help rehabilitate or save potential trees. I'm guessing that tees word was supposed to be trees earlier, from being destroyed. Funding for a master plan to help maintain and monitor water trimming, disease prevention, arborist surveying, Fullerton's urban forests to prevent this from happening to more trees in Fullerton. Lastly, what size, age, and type of trees would be considered for replanting? Thank you. And that's the only comment I have for non-agenda and consent calendar items.
Okay, thanks very much. I'll go ahead and bring it back to council. Are there any consent calendar items that any council member would like to pull? Seeing none, Mr. Zara, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I would like the city manager maybe to answer the question first before we make the motion, but I'd be happy to move the consent calendar.
Okay. Thanks so much. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes 5-0. And as we pass that consent calendar, I realize I skipped past the city council and staff communications. Back to that now and ask our city manager, could you please give us an update on our COVID-19 response and any other updates you'd like to give us?
Absolutely. But at first, Mayor, if we can do a roll call vote for the consent calendar. So if the clerk can call the roll on that.
Council member Silva?
Here.
This is voting on the consent calendar, so aye or nay or yes or no?
Aye.
Unless you're voting present. Councilmember Whitaker?
Aye.
Councilmember Zara?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Flory,
Hi.
and Mayor Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Thank you.
Mr. City Manager?
Yes, real quick, what I'll do is update. The public comment was about the urban growth plan, the tree plan, the forest plan. And yes, what the person wanted, we will be looking at size of trees, placement, types of trees. So everything that was questioned, that will be in that urban forest management plan and the development of it. And that we'll talk about when to remove a tree, what type of tree to put back into place and all that stuff. So, and I believe there may be portions of it in the staff report. So interested folks could go to our website and look at the staff report on that. So, and then with that, what I'd like to do, Madam Mayor, is to talk a little bit about the city's COVID response, the ongoing, but tonight, most particularly talk about the fiscal impact that the city is facing due to the COVID response. And as we all know, there's a lot of businesses that have reduced, shuttered, laid off folks, and that does impact the city greatly because we rely upon sales tax that comes from the retail businesses, and we also rely upon the hotel tax that comes from our hotel. So I do want to share a PowerPoint. We'll bring it up real quick. See, hold on for a minute. Yeah, hold on for a minute, please. Oh, it's loading. So I do apologize that.
Okay, well, while that's loading, why don't we go to some council comments then, and we'll come right back to you.
Perfect.
Councilman Zara, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to really say how proud I am of our community for coming together at this time. And we're seeing a lot of organizations and nonprofits and individuals all step up and do their part with making masks at home or money and support for people who need it the most. So I thank our entire community for being united in our resolve to overcome this this crisis. I do want to also give a shout out to our grocery workers, our healthcare workers, and also our tellers at our banks and credit unions who are essential workers and are still working. And I think no one is noticing the good work that they do as well. So that's all I do say. I am trying to have an online meeting at some point for community who want to have further discussions. Right now, posting regularly on my Facebook page. That's Ahmad Zara Council, and I'll be happy to answer any questions there. Update on the Orange County Water District. Also, there are just like our city, we're also safety protocols there, and then also a lot of information about the safety of our water. It is safe to drink. There is no, it is not affected by COVID-19, and our water meets all the safety standards by the state and the federal government. So if you want any more information on that, you can find
you got back to the host
in English and Spanish and in other in Vietnamese right now on ocwd.com. That is it. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks very much. Mr. Dormer, are you ready with your presentation?
Not yet.
All right, Councilman Whitaker.
None at present.
Okay, Councilman Silva.
Yes. I want to echo what Councilmember Zara mentioned about our workers, our grocery store workers, our bank tellers, and all the other people that are out there on the front lines. Thank you so much for taking it on. And a couple of things. I'm concerned of the homeless that are still out there right now on the streets. Sharon and I drive around at least once a day and see what's going on. And we've seen a number of them by the train station and by the plaza. And with all the restaurants closed, how are they managing for their hygiene? There's nowhere to go. So what I like to see is we can look into getting a couple of porta potties with sinks to wash your hands, because some of these homeless individuals out there who are not in these shelters have to manage themselves. And if there's no places to do that, I'm just afraid that this will cause an even bigger public health hazard. So I like to see that under our state of emergency, our emergency ordinance, we can go ahead and put a couple of porta potties, maybe one by the train station, one by the plaza, so some of these homeless individuals can maintain some sort of proper hygiene during this crisis. Like again, I said I would drive around and everything's closed, so they're not. Who knows what they're doing? So that's number one. And on another part, I was speaking to the trustee president of the Fullerton School District, and she has said that if we need to, they might be able to make available the Blackboard communication system. And for those of you that don't have kids, it's a way to send out voicemails or messages by email to the parents. So if we need to get out a message to some of our residents, they're willing to look at that and have us send out messages to the parents. I know that the elementary school has it, and I do also believe that the high school district has it. So we might be able to cover quite a number of residents if we need to get something out. And she's also indicated that she's willing to allow for us to use their marquees at schools if we need to promote or passing some sort of message on. So those are two things. And aside from that, Mr. Attorney, can we do that under the emergency ordinance? Request to put bathrooms out there, porta potties, or do we have to bring it back for an item, or is it covered under?
The city manager does have the authority to do so, but for the council to give that direction would have to be agendized. But if the city manager believes it's appropriate, he could authorize that under his powers.
And I would like the city manager to comment on that, because I do believe that I think I could be, obviously I could be wrong, but I think that the porta potty at the train station was removed exactly for the reasons you're talking about, those hygiene reasons. So how about if we hear from Ken before we take action on that, if that's okay, Councilman Silva? I completely understand what you're saying.
Yeah, that's fine. And I know I talked to the supervisor's office to see if they had heard from other cities, and they hadn't. But like I said, we drive around once a day, and there's about 10, 12 of them at the train station, and it just goes to wonder what are they doing. But yeah, I'll be happy to hear from the city manager. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Council Member, Mayor, members of council, on the. So we're having a little technical difficulties. My computer froze, and now there's echoes, but such is technology. So on the bathrooms, we're checking with the county. So the county has opened up their regional parks for bathrooms. We have shuttered most of our restrooms at the parks due to concerns about keeping them clean and making sure that it was a safe place. We did remove probably about, now it's 2 months ago or so, the porta potty that was at the Fullerton Transportation Center. And the reason being is because we were getting too many complaints from the contractor about people who were living in there when they were going to clean it. There was some concern for safety of the folks who were cleaning it, and a couple other issues like that regarding health and safety issues. So we could look at where's best to potentially put some type of wash basin. When this first started, we started calling around for wash basins and porta potties. They are in tight supply right now. So that's why we're kind of reaching out to the county, is to look at what additional services they have. One of the issues in having Independence Park serve as now what is essentially a 24/7 shelter is that they're keeping about 60 to 70% of the people who stay overnight there during the day. They're not going now to the downtown area or so. So that is an area where they're staying because there's ample outdoor space, there's ample facilities. And so we do see a reduction, though, and not elimination of folks needing that. So we'll do an assessment. We'll work with the county, see what's out there. And if it comes to it, we could look at what park location makes the best sense just to have an open restroom during this time. And then we'll have to look at what the cleaning costs. On a rough scale, it's about $350 a day for enhanced cleaning of each bathroom facility. And so, we'll take a look at that and see. I don't know if that would be a reimbursable cost.
I just to ask a question here. A lot of folks who, it may always be convenient also for folks who are sleeping out still to go to these porta potties constantly and wash. And I'm wondering if there's a way to also provide, if we can obtain some hand sanitizers, or I know they're short in supply, but I'm wondering if there's a way for us to obtain some to pass out to people who are still out on the streets, not in our facilities. Maybe we can have some assistance from some of the organizations, or do some sort of outreach to see if the community would donate some of their supplies to us, and then we can distribute them.
I think that's a better idea. We have been running short on that supply also. I know that I just signed an invoice for, now we have to buy it in 5-gallon jugs and then refill what we have just to keep our supply going. And a lot of times we're going through the Emergency Operations Center at the county to make sure that we can be on their supply list. So, do know that there's some local businesses in the Orange County area that were kind of changing their product line to sanitizers. And even the district attorney was giving out smaller hand sanitizers. So I think that's a good idea to reach out to some of the community members and nonprofits and see what they can do.
Councilman Silva, did you have anything else?
Yeah, so yeah, I really like to look into it, because if you guys get a chance to drive through Wilshire there, and during the day or through the train station, there's quite a number of them out there, and I don't know if the Wilshire church there is opening up their restrooms, and even St. Mary's, that there's a number out there, and I don't know if St. Mary's, I know they were at a time St. Mary's was allowing the individuals there to use the restrooms. I don't know if that's happening. So it is kind of for me, it's a humanity thing, that they're out there, they don't want to go into shelters for whatever reason, and we can't make them dead. So I think we have to just provide something for them to take care of their needs.
Okay, thank you very much for bringing that up, Councilman. Mayor Pro Tem Flory, do you have anything this evening? Try again, you're still muted.
Found the unmute button. There's a lot of feedback coming through to me. Is it coming through to all of you as well? It sounds like voices in the background. No? Okay. Anyway, I'm doing a report on attending the Wednesday farmers market behind the library. I went over there about 10 o'clock. The vendors were very happy to see people. There were maybe 20 people, but everybody was really, really respectful of the distances. The fruit, the veggies and eggs and bread and all that kind of thing. Nobody is selling anything like clothing or jewelry. It's just it's food products. But it was well managed. Everything is prepackaged, and I would encourage people to support our vendors by going over there and at the same time getting those things that you need without fear of contamination or anything like that. I have a question. Will the farmers market be open tomorrow or Thursday? Is Ken on?
Mr. City Manager, there's a question for you about the Thursday farmers market. I believe it's opening this week.
It was actually open last week, and it will be open again. It's not the same format that we've had in the past with additional issues, the beer garden, and all that stuff. But the Wednesday will be again tomorrow at the library parking lot. We do have inclement weather, but they are under the solar canopies, so I believe those vendors are going to be showing up because they do have that protection. And then the Thursday will be rain dependent because in the past we've also canceled that due to rain. But we'll check and we'll have that posted on our website if the Thursday is going to be around just because of the rain.
Yeah. Okay. And then I have one other comment having to do with item number 2, the application for the grant. And part of this is creating an urban forest master plan. And if there is a possibility to slug in a component having to do with utilization of some of the ancient, the old wood out of those big trees that will be coming down, there are examples of seating that is created out of these big logs, and it's just perfect for the trail system. And speaking of the trail system, I think we have to have a conversation about whether or not the stairs should be closed. I walk Hillcrest Park regularly. I know that we've received a few emails from people that are concerned that we haven't closed our parks and trails, and I would not advocate for that because my experience in walking the trails in the park is that people are very respectful, and there's only occasional times when people are not staying away as far as they should. The stairs is another matter, and I would like staff to consider closing them for about 30 days because they are barely 3 feet across. I would say 3 feet, 4 feet at the tops. And even though I thought the idea of creating a one-way trajectory was pretty inspired, the fact of the matter is when you get an old lady like me going up the stairs, you're going to have a lot of people that are moving past me, and they are huffing and puffing, and they are way too close. So either maybe a softer approach would be, if you're going to use the stairs, you have to use a mask, end of story, or just flat close the stairs down for 30 days. There are all kinds of ways to get up into the park without having to go up the stairs. And I would just, we don't have anything to report about events and things that we've been going to because basically all that's stopped. I know Councilmember Zara is going out doing Meals on Wheels, which is very, very commendable. And he sent me a link recently where people can donate to Meals on Wheels to help our seniors and those in distress. And I would just say to everybody, be strong and be careful.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we have told everyone as we've kept our parks and trails open that we need them to do their part, and that is to keep a proper social distance. It is very difficult, as you said, Mayor Pro Tem Flory, to do it on the stairs because of the size of them and the different athletic ability of everybody. So I do think now is the time that for the next couple weeks we need to close the stairs. As California is looking to come into the peak. And you hear my dog behind me, so hold on just a second. So I have a puppy, and she had a water bottle, so sorry about that. I would echo what you said, Mayor Pro Tem Flory, about closing down the stairs for the time being. It kills me to do it because I consider exercise essential, but as you said, there's plenty of ways to get up into that park. And as I'm out on the trails and in the parks, I see lots of people wearing masks and observing a proper social distance. So I do think we should close the stairs. I just wanted to thank everyone in Fullerton for hanging in there and for doing their best during what are really trying, uncertain times. And I want to encourage everyone to continue to hang in there. As Pastor Phillips said earlier, there are resources here in town if you need them. And I'm sure that many do. If you go to www.lovefullerton.org, there are also resources there for you. It's not just volunteer opportunities, but opportunities for you to get the resources that you need. And in that vein, I would ask city staff if we have a list of resources that we can put up on our website for people who are struggling financially, struggling with groceries. I understand, unfortunately, that during times like this, domestic violence increases. And just the need for all-around support is really evident in the emails that I've gotten from people. And I know of things going on in the community. And I love that the city has set up a support system for our small businesses, namely our restaurants, through the new website, dinefullerton.com. And I would love to see resources for people in need to be able to be accessed through our website as well. I've been, at the city's request, I've been filming a really short video every week just to touch base with people in Fullerton, and I'll continue to try to do that. I also had a meeting last week over Zoom with mayors across Orange County. In fact, I think 30 of 34 mayors, if I'm correct, participated in that, talking about best practices and what the needs in each city are right now. I let the other mayors know that I'm working on putting a coalition of mayors together to address some really what I see as 5 critical issues for city resiliency through this. And I'll be prepared at the next meeting to share those 5 tenets with you. But it has everything to do, it kind of spans the gamut from asking the governor to freeze the CalPERS discount rate at its current rate for the next 2 years, to asking the governor to mandate free, widely available, standardized testing throughout the 58 counties in California. And to make cities whole as he defers sales tax from small businesses. Things like that are really going to mean the difference between, prosperity in cities, city services, being able to keep our city services moving forward the way people are accustomed to them, or not being able to provide those services. So with that, I would ask the city manager, I think that leads well into the presentation that you have on our finances, if you have it ready.
Yeah, let me try that one more time and let's see how this surface works. Perfect. Okay, Mayor, members of council, and to the residents, this public health crisis, this pandemic, has had significant fiscal impact to city revenues, as we talked a little bit about the impact of businesses and the hotels. And we're going to break it into 2 things. Really, I'm going to concentrate on fiscal year 2019-20, which is the operating budget that we are operating in right now. We have about 3 months left of this fiscal year. So as amended, we had projected that there would be 98 million in expenditures. There's a little typo there, sorry about that. That in the general fund, that includes the library and park funds. Revenues for the general fund were projected at about 98,186,000. for 91. And so essentially we were balanced. We had a little bit more revenues projected over expenditures. So we had a balanced budget for this year. The revenue impacts from reduced sales tax, transit occupancy taxes, that's the hotel tax or bed tax, development related fees, and all other revenues, which includes library funds, fines, forfeitures, parking permits, and all that stuff. That hit is about 3.1 million as we project it right now for the current fiscal year. And so since we were balanced with equal revenues and equal expenditures, that creates an instant deficit in this general fund. So in going over the general fund revenue sources, property taxes are largest. That was budgeted at about 45.3 million for this fiscal year. It's about 46% of our total general fund revenue. For right now, there's no identified major threat for this year. So property values are not declining precipitously or anything like that. But future years depend on the market conditions, the potential for bankruptcies and defaults, and then really the price of homes once they're sold based on the market. And that's impacted by the labor market. With so many layoffs and other displacements, we don't know how property values are going to rebound and come back and how soon, or if they're going to dip. So that's one thing that we're going to hold out. The most immediate issue, and there's been some play in the news media about this, was whether the collection of property taxes, which is due April 10th, that's the second installment, was going to be deferred or delayed for several months, if not more. The issue there is that has an immediate impact to our ability for cash flow and liquidity. And so what happens in a cash flow basis, we get that 45 million in property tax in two lumps, basically around April and around December. And so if that's, or a little bit earlier in December, if that's disrupted, we have our cash flow basis going on that. So we've been looking at our investments, moving things around to have some more liquidity just in case. Fortunately, right now, from all indication and the communication from Sherry Friedenrich, who is the Orange County Treasurer Tax Collector, has that they have the majority of property taxes collected. So at this point of time, most residents in Orange County have paid their property taxes. And if somebody is impacted by COVID because they weren't impounding their property taxes, or they were, waiting towards the end to pay it on their own, and they can't, there are mechanisms within the current law that they can appeal to the Orange County Treasurer Tax Collector for relief. So that is there. Sales tax is probably our biggest concern because it's an indicator really for the life of our retail and commercial businesses. And we do know as you travel the roads and you go downtown, there are businesses shut. Restaurants are shut. Restaurants are now just doing takeout. Their revenue is a fraction of what they used to do. So we had budgeted about 22.2 million for the current fiscal year. We're projecting at this time, and again, it's just a projection, that will be about 7% down. So that's down to 20.6 million. A couple indicators, and working with our consultant, HDL, they're looking at, in general, the auto industry this second quarter of 2020, so that's April, May, June, to be down by 32%. Business industry down by 16.5%. Fuel service stations down by 20%. With people staying home, they're not driving. So general consumer goods down 25%. And then restaurants and hotels down by 20%, which that's a very conservative, because we have two major hotels here that are already closed. And so that's the big issue there, is some of these hotels get to the point and then they say, well, we can't do it, so we're just going to close for the time being. And that's a major impact to us because we do have that 10% transit occupancy tax on there. So the biggest concern is the length of the stay at home and the overall effects of that. How long it goes depends if we see some of these indicators going into the next year, next operating budget, which starts July 1. How long does the economy take to rebuild? Once a restaurant opens, once a movie theater opens, will people feel comfortable going back out into crowds? And so there's going to be a delay So we're going to be seeing some impact in next year's projections for revenue, which is going to impact our overall budget. We are currently working on all that. This is the natural time that we would be doing our budget for next year. And we're feverishly looking at everything and trying to put it all together. So continuing on the transit occupancy tax or hotel tax, they've had a deep impact. The projection we're using is that there's really going to be basically no taxes in the last 3 months of this fiscal year, so April, May, June. Overall projection is over a 30% decline. So unlike Anaheim, which gets over, I think it's 186, 190 million a year in TOT taxes, we get about 3.3 million. But we're losing $1 million, so that's a third of it. So, and then even with the stay-at-home order lifted, we don't know the impact. The transportation industry, airlines, travel industry are all impacted. Issues with Disneyland and all that stuff, where people would stay in Fullerton also. We don't know how that's going to rebound, and if summer is just going to be really a big staycation type approach for everybody in America. So we'll see how that works, and we're going to try to project that as best as possible. The other revenue funds, library, parks, recreation, leases. So the library fund has a reduction of about 10%. That's a loss of $41,000. People say, well, the library is, about a $4.2 million operation. It is. It's subsidized by the general fund. So the library in general only generates about $420,000 or so through their efforts. Park fund reduction of 27.3, mostly Parks and Rec. That is, the tennis center is shut down. Wedding venues are shut down and not operating. So it's all the lease revenue that we get through Parks and Rec. That's a loss of about $750,000. So then there's leases. So we are the landlord. Wings, Summit House, which is a big one, Spaghetti Factory. Spaghetti Factory has closed and closed down early. Summit House is down to about 30% of their staffing, and they're trying to make it. They are doing lunchtime and to-go orders. And so if you love their creamed corn, please go there, get their creamed corn. And they're doing a great job. We've been in constant communication with them. So, and then some of the other issues, parking fines, other penalties, et cetera. Some of those things are, based on council policy to loosen up on overnight parking restrictions and ticketing and other issues like that. So it's all across the board on the revenue loss. And that's just in the general fund. And the non-general funds, which are water, sewer, even the airport funds, will have impacts there. So other revenue sources, now these are non-general funds, but these do impact us, the gas tax. So there's going to be a reduction both current year and then projected for next year. And again, just basic projections right now, because these are unknown factors that will be dependent on people's behavior changes. If everybody gets back in their car and starts driving again, they're going to be using gas and buying gas. If they don't, and if jobs are slow to recover, then we're going to see those losses. So gas tax is down about 4%, 161,000. We're projecting right now just overall about 305,000 for next year. SB1 tax is down about 2%. That's 50,000. And then Measure M2 is also down about 2%. But because of the way it's done, we're projecting right now about 223,000 reduction for next year. So, current year reductions of 262 and next year reductions off the top of about 580,000. As we know, all of our road funds, we put to good use. And so any reduction is painful because it just means, less slurry, less crack seal, and, one less mile of doing something with our roads. So ongoing concerns, again, are just based on the length of stay. We've put out that we're going to look again around April 17th, but we do know that the schools are pretty much done for the year. Pretty much things are going to be clamped down through April until about May 1st, and then we'll see what May brings. So it's going to be a very slow recovery, and that really is going to impact us both this current fiscal year and mostly for next fiscal year. Also, the governor did, as the mayor mentioned, do a small business sales tax deferral, and that's for businesses that earn up to $5 million in taxable sales. So it's up to the first $50,000 in that sales tax. And that impacts us greatly because it's technically, money that would come to us. And that's not been factored into our projections for this current or fiscal year because that was announced by the governor late last week. We don't have a full understanding of exactly how it's going to be done and how it's going to be paid back, if we're going to be made whole by the state. So those are some huge unknowns in that. The other issue is, we are doing our best. We have our every morning 7:30 EOC briefings with the entire EOC team, the department heads and safety personnel. And we are taking copious notes on everything that we do as far as reimbursement. And we will be seeking reimbursement, and that was part of the issue for the local emergency declaration. But we also know that it's not 100% reimbursable ability. If it's 50%, I think I would be happy with that, but I don't even know if it's going to be 50%. And then, of course, during an emergency like this, there's additional costs that we're putting on. So it's not as though, we're just going with our current budget. We're actually expending more and going with that. And then the last is just length and extent of the crisis. So let me bring it back.
So, Mr. City Manager, as you finish that, I would like to agendize for our next meeting an action item for us to create a special COVID-19 legislative platform that includes state and federal issues. I see that there are issues, as I mentioned earlier, with CalPERS, with testing procedures, with sales tax, economic development funding that we need here at the city for infrastructure and to get our economy rolling again. And also at the federal level, the federal stimulus package, $1.5 billion is coming to the state of California, and not one penny is earmarked for any city under 500,000 population, which is the vast majority of cities in California. So we are wholly at the mercy of our county government to share that funding with cities. So I think it's imperative that this city council arm its lobbyists with the information that they need to advocate on our behalf.
Okay.
Yeah, I would.
So we will deal with our federal and state lobbyists, also Townsend Public Affairs, to help us with that.
Mm-hmm. Good, thanks. Are there other questions or comments for the city manager on that? Okay, and Ken,
I had one.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Silva?
Yeah, Ken, you said there was a couple of hotels closing or closed. And we know who, can you tell us which ones they are, or is that wrapped?
It's Howard Johnson's and the Holiday Inn.
Thank you.
So the Marriott so far, they're very low in their occupancy rate, but they are still open. Of course, the restaurant and other sales aren't going forward, but they still have some rooms open.
Okay, good to know. Are there other updates that you have for us?
Yes, actually on the economic development news and all that stuff. Starting next Thursday, the city will start hosting a weekly WebEx meeting, this thing, and hopefully we're all good on the technology, with the Small Business Development Council. We'll start with how to seek loans, marketing, starting back up for small businesses. SBA, SCORE, the Korean Chamber of Commerce, and the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce have been asked to join us on this. And then we're also going to be working with the North Orange County Chamber of Commerce for publicity and getting more members in. So again, that's some of the stuff that we're working on for the economic side of it. And we're happy to be hosting that with the SBDC.
Mr. Manager, could you share with this information in advance, post some advance notices for for our residents and businesses to see on the website, and also to share with us so we can share with our constituents as well who we're in contact with.
Absolutely. Yeah, we just, Kelly Fritzel, our Deputy Director of Community Economic Development, just solidified that today. So we're going to be getting it on the website, specifically the dinefullerton.com website, where we have a resources. So small businesses can click on the resources. They'll be able to see additional information. And then we'll get this out to you once we have all the final details, timing, and all that out. So absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. With that, then let's go to the one public hearing that we have this evening. It's on municipal code amendments pertaining to accessory and junior accessory dwelling units. And I believe our Community and Economic Development Director, Matt Folks, is going to give that report.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Fitzgerald. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes, I see some nods, so we'll get going. Well, good virtual evening to everybody. The item this evening before you is the ordinance amendment for accessory dwelling units, or ADUs. I do have a short presentation that I'll go through, and then we can quickly get to any questions that you might have. So just as a brief background, accessory dwelling units have been called many things through the years, but really in state legislation got started in the early 80s. For about the first 30 years or so, not too many things changed. There was some minor amendments to the law, but really things really started changing in 2016 when the governor signed some pretty substantial legislation regarding accessory dwelling units and actually retitled them. They had been known as limited second dwelling units, granny flats, casitas, a number of terms before. And then the most recent revision was in October of 2019 that we're going to be talking about tonight, and that all went into effect on January 1st of this year. So all of that new legislation was the combination of a handful of bills that all went through in October of 2019. Each of the bills was related to accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units, and each one touched on a different aspect related to, you can see here, enforcement, sales and collections, HOAs, as well as some development standards. And as I mentioned, they all did become effective on January 1st, 2020. And so the item tonight is to bring Fullerton's municipal code into alignment with those state regulations. For those that may not be familiar, an accessory dwelling unit and a junior accessory dwelling unit come in kind of a variety of flavors. There is the attached unit, a detached unit, and then an incorporation of existing square footage. It can be new construction, it can be an addition, or it can be actually reconfigured out of existing space. It can also include basements. However, we don't really have too many basements here in California or here in Fullerton. Some activity here in Fullerton since 2012. The chart on the left kind of shows we really weren't doing too many new accessory dwelling units, or limited second dwelling units as they are referred to. Then in 2017, when that new legislation did become effective, started to see an uptick. And then you can see where the really big jumps has been really in the last 12 months. In March of last year, the City Council waived the Parks Acquisition and Development Fee. And this is about a $12,000 fee that was applied to every new dwelling unit in the city. And so you can see we saw a pretty big spike when that fee was waived. And then really just in the last 2-3 months of 2020, we've seen a very large increase in the number of accessory dwelling units. The pie chart on the right kind of shows you how the breakdown of accessory dwelling units that we're seeing. So you can see over 50% are in the new construction detached. That means that it's detached from the primary house and it's brand new construction. So they're not doing an addition or a reconfiguration, but it's actually brand new on the property. And if you add ADUs, attached, new construction, and detached, you can see that's a little over 60%. That pie slice that says second unit is really just reflective of the accessory units that were constructed pre-2016 when it was called second dwelling units, not accessory dwelling units. The new laws that went into effect as of January 1st really touched on almost every aspect of the regulations for both accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units. We do have information available in the ordinance and on the website that goes into a lot of detail, but generally they touched on converting existing square footage, both new construction and attached detached. They have more information regarding the various parking exemptions and parking requirements. These new regulations did touch on accessory dwelling units within multifamily development, which is a new provision that just is recent to the 2020 code amendment, as well as ADUs in our office professional zone. Junior accessory dwelling units also had some clarifications from the previous code amendment. A couple other state provisions that were included in this code cleanup. There's some provisions related to fire sprinklers, which are only required when the primary unit has sprinklers. Impact fees, development impact fees. The state law waived all development impact fees for accessory dwelling units that are less than 750 square feet in size. As you know, the City Council waives development impact fees related to parks and acquisition. And so our proposed amendment tonight does continue to waive development impact fees even for accessory dwelling units that are over that 750 square foot size. Anything less than that is not subject to any of the development impact fees. They are still subject potentially to utility connection fees, but only to the extent that the accessory dwelling unit requires a separate new utility connection. So many accessory dwelling units connect to the existing water for the site, the existing sewer. However, in a situation where a property owner wants a separate water meter or separate sewer, they are still subject to those utility connection fees. And that's primarily because those fees are a pass-through fee to the sanitation district. And so it's not something that we would be eligible to waive. There is still owner occupancy requirements. However, it has been reduced to only applicable for junior accessory dwelling units. So any other accessory dwelling unit, whether attached or detached, new construction or addition, they no longer require the property owner to live on site, either in the accessory unit or in the primary structure. And that is a change in the new code. The only requirement still is if you have a junior accessory dwelling unit, which is created out of existing square footage within the home and less than 500 square feet, it does require owner occupancy in either the JADU or the primary unit. Short-term rentals are prohibited for ADUs and JADUs, so you cannot use the accessory unit or a junior accessory unit as a short-term rental. And then there is a new provision here which does allow for separate sale of the ADU or JADU only in the cases of a nonprofit corporation or low-income housing. And an example of that would be like a Habitat for Humanity project where they potentially would allow for the separate sale. But outside of those nonprofit corporations or low-income housing, they cannot sell the accessory dwelling unit separately from the primary house. And so with that, a short presentation tonight, but with that, we're recommending introduce the ordinance amending Title 15 related to accessory dwelling units by first reading and waive second reading, and that this ordinance is a statutorily exempt. There was a new CEQA exemption created for accessory dwelling units as part of the state law. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Are there any questions among the council? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and ask the city clerk I'll go ahead and open the public hearing to the public to comment on this issue. Ms. City Clerk, were there any members of the public who wish to comment?
We received no e-comments on this item.
Okay, thanks so much. So I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the city council. Ms. Flory, did you have a motion? Go ahead and unmute yourself if you had a motion.
I'll make the motion, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zara. Ms. Flory?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you so much. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Ms. City Clerk, could you take a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Silva.
Aye.
Councilmember Whitaker.
He was muted, but I heard him mouth the word "I." If you could unmute yourself so you can be on the record. There you go.
There he is.
Aye.
Thank you.
Councilmember Zara.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Flory.
Aye.
And Mayor Fitzgerald.
Aye.
That is a 5-0, and if you'll indulge me, I'll read the title of the ordinance. This is ordinance number 3280, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fullerton, California, approving an amendment to the Fullerton Municipal Code, Chapter 15.17, to update the zoning ordinance provisions pertaining to accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units and associated definitions in 15.04 in accordance with recent legislation amending the California Government Code, Sections 65852.2 and 65852.22.
Thank you so much. Okay, that takes us to our one regular business item, and that is a resolution of intent to amend the Fullerton Municipal Code pertaining to off-site advertising, which is billboards. And Mr. Folks, I think we take it back to you. Except that you're muted, so you're going to have to start all over again.
All right, I'm back. I'm good? Okay. All right, so this item following up here is a resolution of intention for an amendment to Title 15 related to offsite advertising, specifically billboards. See if the presentation is going to cooperate. One moment, let me see. All right, everybody see that on the screen?
Yes.
All right, so just as a quick, by way of quick background here, the city was approached by a property owner and a billboard company regarding the construction of a freeway-oriented electronic billboard adjacent to the 57 freeway. And this was about 12 months ago, a little over a year ago. Currently, the municipal code does prohibit off-site signage. There are a couple of limited exceptions for allowing off-site signage. They're related to residential subdivisions and open houses, so directing folks to an open house or a new residential subdivision. However, all other off-site signage is prohibited, and our municipal code specifically calls out billboards as a prohibited type of sign. Also, as you know, there are a number of existing electronic billboards, both on our two freeways that border our city, both the 57 and the 91. The three images kind of on the left part of the screen, two are from near the Cal State Fullerton campus. One is there closer, that's actually in the city of Placentia, although many folks probably assume that's city of Fullerton. And then also in the city of Buena Park, there are a number of billboards. I grabbed this one. This is off the 91 right there at Beach Boulevard, advertising for the Source. So there are a number of electronic billboards on both the 57 and 91 freeway. The ones on the Cal State Fullerton campus are not controlled or regulated by the city of Fullerton, and then the Placentia and Buena Park. The proposed amendment would amend Chapter 15.49 of the Municipal Code, and that's where we contain all of our sign regulations. This amendment would create development standards, definitions, as well as a review and approval procedure should the city wish to move forward with allowing electronic billboards. We would also have development standards related to the location, height, display face size, brightness, which is a big issue, especially if it points towards any adjacent residential, setback requirements, and then some design features. And then we could also look at doing a separation criteria between signs, or we could look to do a total number, limit the total number of permitted signs within the city of Fullerton. So whenever we amend the municipal code, especially in this case, we do have a lot of, I would say, discretion, and the council can provide a great deal of direction in terms of how the who, what, how, where, and why of billboards should the city decide to move forward with them. If the city council does elect to approve the resolution of intention, we would go back with my staff and we would prepare the amendments to Chapter 15.49 of the municipal code. We would do a study session with the Planning Commission, since they are the regulators of Title 15 and the recommending body to the City Council. We go ahead and revise it and refine based on input from the Planning Commission. It would need to go through a two-step process. So public hearing with the Planning Commission for the proposed amendments. They would then be the recommending body to the City Council, and then it would come back to the City Council for first reading of the ordinance. So with that, the staff recommendation this evening is to adopt the resolution of intention to amend Title 15 pertaining to the regulation of off-site advertising, specifically billboards. And then I would love, even through this virtual environment, if we could get a little bit of initial direction from the council regarding some of those basic parameters. Obviously, the details will be crafted by staff through a best practices, but if you do have some general comments, now would be a fantastic time so that we can make sure we're crafting something that reflects the goals of the City Council. And with that, I'm good.
Okay, thanks so much. Are there questions of Matt Folks? Mr. Zara.
I just have a quick question. So we're not actually approving anything tonight other than the intention to look at this further. So give you basically direction to come back with us with more details and process.
That's correct. So the way our municipal code reads is it always, anytime you amend the zoning code, it requires this two-step process. And step one is always the resolution of intention. Once that's approved, that's giving direction for staff to go forward and prepare something. And then we come back at a public hearing, first with the planning commission and then to the city council.
Okay. And then the other question is that in this resolution or in future information that you'll bring back to us as far as items, are any of this,
Can you get that off Zara's?
does any of this consider having shared revenue with billboard owners, and then also whether it's on private or public land? Those are my two questions.
Absolutely. So to your first question, yes, absolutely. The approval process, whatever we decide it will be, in many other cities that allow billboards, they utilize a process called the development agreement. And within that development agreement, it would specify the revenue sharing between the city and the private billboard manufacturer, billboard operator, and possibly the property owner. We have done an analysis of available public property adjacent to the freeways. And unfortunately for us, there are no city-owned properties where a billboard would be available on freeway frontages. So all of the billboards that would be considered under this amendment would be placed on private property. However, as I mentioned, we would be looking to do some amount of revenue sharing in exchange for allowing a billboard to be constructed.
And one final question, sorry. As far as the content, the advertisement itself and the content, I know there are some First Amendment issues here that need to be taken into consideration. Do we have any authority to make sure the content is friendly, family friendly?
Yes. So you're absolutely right. There is some First Amendment regulations. And so as a city, we could not necessarily restrict content. However, what other cities have done is through the development agreement, the billboard operator has voluntarily submitted that they would restrict certain content based on the city's goals. So it's common to not allow advertising for certain types of businesses, but that would all be specified through the development agreement. And it would be a voluntary measure by the billboard operator, not a requirement from the city.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. Are there other questions of the city council?
Mayor, this is Jesus.
Mr. Silva.
Yes, in the report that they mentioned that Eastvale has an agreement where they get $50,000 or 12% of the gross receipts. With the two billboards in Placentia and Buena Park, what's their agreement? Do we know what type of agreement they have?
I do Councilman Silva, I do have information, the Buena Park agreement. I don't have it in front of me, but it's similar in that it is a percentage of the gross revenue of the billboard or a specified amount. And I would have to reach out to the city of Placentia, but the common contractual arrangement is that the city gets a percentage of the gross revenue, and then they set typically a minimum threshold. Buena Park actually had a graduating scale that in year one, it was X, in year two, and it grew over the course of a 10-year term. And so there's a lot of flexibility into how that agreements are crafted. And we would probably look to craft an agreement probably similar to Eastvale in setting a minimum amount and then a percentage of the gross revenue, but we would work that out with the billboard operator themselves.
And Councilmember Silva, I have a little experience when I was back in Placentia and then also just living in Orange. Placentia, they own the lots that their billboards are on. So the revenue they get is in excess of $500,000 a year from the 3 sites, which I believe have, I think, 4 digital faces. So you have the sides, you have a static, or you have a digital. In one case, there's 2 digitals, and each one has a different revenue source for it. But because Placentia is the property owner, they get a lot more money than just a percentage. In Orange, there was a billboard ban for moratorium, and the city allowed a current standing billboard to be changed out to a digital board. And for that, the city negotiated a fee that the first year was $100,000, and then it went down to $65,000 for the first 5 years after that, and then $5,000 each 5-year time period after that up. And it was part of a relocation. So they also relocated or removed 2 or 3 other smaller billboards that were on interior streets. So, but that was through a development agreement. And so that's probably one of the features we would look at is what's the public benefit and what could we get out of it as far as a public benefit for that. So we have a range, and we'll look at more if there's some other examples throughout Southern California.
Thank you. And can we get the Buena Park numbers for next time?
Yes, we can make sure we have that available.
Yeah. When we get that, we could provide it to council just so you have that information as we move forward. And of course, that will come out through the planning commission process and all that too.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of council? Ms. Flory?
Okay. Am I unmuted? I guess I am. Matt, you were asking for parameters, location, number permitted, etc. I think that there's not going to be that many opportunities for these kinds of electronic digital billboards. But one of my parameters would be that the impacts on residential property be seriously considered. And in fact, that if there were impacts on residential properties, that they not be permitted. That's one of the things that would be important to me. Location, yeah, the reason I would support it along the 57 freeway is because it's Billboard Alley right now. I mean, there are so many there, and along the Platinum Triangle in Anaheim. So I think it's silly to prohibit that kind of electronic display. I do have a question about next steps. Can you give me some idea of the timeline on your next steps thing? It seems like a lot of steps to get there, to amend the ordinance. I mean, we just did a fairly major ordinance on accessory units, and that didn't include all this stuff.
Well, it's so great that you mentioned that, because many of these steps were actually part of the accessory dwelling unit ordinance preparation in terms of speaking with the planning commission, making revisions, and then having a planning commission public hearing to make a recommendation on the action. So there's a number of steps in this list, but many of these steps occur very quickly or sometimes at the same time. A step, if you were looking to accelerate the process, would be to go ahead and forego the study session with the planning commission, because that's not a required component to a code amendment. What the planning commission has said on other items is that when a large item or a complicated item such as this comes to them, they would prefer not to be put on the spot in terms of having to make a decision in the moment, and would prefer to take it as a study session. But we could look to maybe do a memorandum that gives some background in advance. So I would, although we have a lot going on right now, admittedly, I think that we could look to do this in probably 60 to 90 days and be back to the planning commission and or city council by midsummer.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great. With that, I'd ask if the city clerk has any comments from members of the public on this item.
We have no comments on this item.
Okay, thanks. Then I'll go ahead and bring it back to council. Ms. Flory?
I will move the recommendation.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. And as far as further direction, Mr. Folks, I would say that I hear what Mayor Pro Tem Flory is saying about impacts to residential properties. I also know in these instances that many residential properties claim impacts. So, I mean, I would look to, verifiable impacts. I would look to mitigation plans. I would not want to restrict someone's private property from being able to host an electronic billboard if they can properly mitigate for impacts that might be perceived on neighboring properties. But in general, I support electronic billboards being able to be utilized. And I also support being able to remove the standard billboards or the static billboards in exchange for, putting up electronic billboards. I don't know if that helps you as you move forward, but that's kind of how I feel about it. Are there other comments before we move to a vote? Mr. Whitaker, if you just unmute yourself.
That's okay. Is that good?
Yep, that's good.
Okay. I've long advocated freeing up the benefits of utilizing billboard advertising, particularly in an area where it can be such an asset commercially and for information, an area where our freeways are frequented by visitors from the outside. So I think that this has been a long time coming. I would be in favor of utilizing current technologies to overcome any impacts on local residents. And I think those should be minimized. But to the extent that we can free up this asset, I've been arguing that for many years, and I'm happy to see this.
I agree with you. Yeah, thank you. Are there other comments before we take a vote? Okay, seeing none, if everyone could unmute their microphones, and I'll go ahead and call the vote. Ms. City Clerk, could you take a roll call?
Councilmember Silva,
Aye.
Councilmember Whitaker,
Aye.
Councilmember Zara,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Flory,
Yes.
and Mayor Fitzgerald.
Yes.
Okay, 5-0. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. And there were no items removed from our consent calendar. And so now we're going to recess to our closed session, and then we'll come back for anything to report out after our closed session is over. If all the city council could stay on the meeting right now while we stop the broadcast for our closed session, please.
Mrs. Mayor, the council, before they can go into closed session, must ask for public comments, if there are any public comments on the closed.
Good, thanks. Ms. City Clerk, are there any public comments on closed session items?
We have no public comments.
Okay, thanks. Mr. City Attorney, thank you for keeping me in line there. So with that, we'll go ahead and recess to closed session.
No, I'm in Auburn.
You're in Auburn. I don't know why I'm thinking Idaho. Thinking Snake River, you're in Auburn. Oh, fun for you.
Yeah, relaxing.
I'll bet you it's very easy to isolate up there.
Well, it is.
It's what?
Very easy. I've got lots of land. We
Yeah.
walk every day, so it's nice that way.
Come here.
Okay, Mr. City Manager, are we back on?
Yes, we are good to go.
Okay, great. I'd like to reconvene the regular meeting and turn to our city attorney for a closed session report.
Yes, reporting out a closed session based on a prior action by the City Council in closed session regarding a case called Ramos versus Nearcal. The City Council, on unanimous vote, motion by Ms. Fitzgerald and second by Mr. Silva, unanimously approved a settlement in the amount of $125,000. That's my report.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. City Attorney. I appreciate that. Mr. City Manager, is there anything else from you before we adjourn tonight's meeting?
I have
There
one.
is not.
Okay, and Mayor Pro Tem Flory, did you have something?
I thought you said the name of the case was Ramos versus Meercal.
Yes, it's a motorcycle accident. Our firm did not handle it. Over off of Harbor Boulevard.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought you were going to be reporting out on the denial of the claim. I'm sorry.
Okay, and then were there any other comments from council before we adjourn tonight's meeting?
Nope.
Okay, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Thank the city council, the city staff for meeting us like this evening. And I want to wish the people of the city of Fullerton health and peace. And we'll be back in 2 weeks for our next meeting. Thanks so much. This meeting's adjourned.
Have a good night, everyone.
All right.
Good night.
Night.